The Young and the Restless spoilers full episodes. Jack returned to Genoa, inadvertently creating a major conflict and causing an explosion. The idea that Patty could simply return to their lives after everything she had done in the past seemed impossible, almost absurd. Patty was identified as the woman who had caused countless problems. Patty yelled, telling Diane to get out of the Abbott mansion. From now on, she would be the mistress of the house. Jack gave Diane a cold, crude, and hateful look. There was no warmth in his eyes, no relief, no signs of the emotional storm that usually erupts after a traumatic event. Instead, he almost looked calm, as if he had made the decision long before entering that room. Break up. That's what Jack said to Diane. Diane asked, "What the hell? Why are you saying that? Why are you with Patty?" He said he was divorcing Diane. The words were like a thunderclap. Kyle and Billy were both there, and they didn't understand what Diane was talking about. Billy was furious. He didn't want this to continue, and he demanded she stop. Patty had manipulated Jack, possibly giving him some kind of drug. She couldn't accept the idea that the man she loved could so easily walk into their house and declare an end to their marriage as if nothing had happened. But what happened next shocked everyone even more. Jack walked towards Diane, his face tense with an emotion that seemed more like an annoyance than pain. Then, in a sudden, unexpected outburst of violence, he slapped her hard across the face. This was the first time Jack had done this to Diane. Everyone knew how much he loved her, but this slap seemed to end everything. Diane was devastated. Diane staggered, a hand covering her cheek as the reality of what had just happened slowly washed over her. Kyle's reaction was instantaneous. He lunged forward in a fit of rage, unable to accept what he had just witnessed. Billy and Kyle both lunged at Jack, grabbing him by the neck, the scene escalating. The situation quickly descended into chaos in seconds. Kyle pushed his father away while Billy tried to restrain him, both shouting questions that Jack seemed unwilling to answer. Why had he changed so suddenly? Why did he want a divorce from Diane after everything they had been through together? And the most disturbing question of all, why was he now declaring he wanted to marry Patty? The thought sounded so absurd that Kyle could barely bring himself to say it. Yet Jack repeated it with an uncanny certainty, as if the decision had already been made deep in his mind. Across the room, Patty watched the entire scene unfold with a quiet, almost unsettling satisfaction. While the Abbott family struggled to comprehend the chaos erupting before them, Patty stood there with a small, triumphant smile on her lips. For years, she had lived in the shadow of rejection, haunted by the belief that Jack was never meant for her and her alone. Now, seeing the Abbott family crumble before her eyes, she felt it was distorted victory. She didn't need to scream or argue. The destruction had occurred exactly as she had envisioned. Each angry accusation leveled against Jack, each desperate plea from Diane only deepened the crack Patty had long dreamed of. In her mind, this moment was proof that fate had finally sided with her. But for Diane, the scene unfolding around her was like the collapse of everything she had worked so hard to rebuild. The stinging sensation on her cheek was nothing compared to the emotional devastation tearing through her chest. She looked at Jack, desperately searching for any trace of the man she loved, hoping to find some sign that it was all a misunderstanding, that somewhere beneath the cold exterior, Jack was still there. Instead, she saw a stranger. That truth hurt her even more.
The damp, oppressive darkness of the undisclosed basement had been Jack Abbott's entire universe for what felt like an eternity. Time had lost all meaning, dissolving into a hazy, nightmarish continuum of whispered lies, chemical-induced stupors, and the relentless, rhythmic ticking of a metronome. Patty Williams had not merely held the patriarch of the Abbott family captive. She had meticulously, surgically dismantled his psyche. While the heavy leather restraints had kept his physical body tethered to the iron-framed bed, it was the psychological chain she forged that truly bound him. She had capitalized on his isolation and vulnerability, administering a daily calculated cocktail of hallucinogens and suggestibility-enhancing narcotics that rendered the formidable, brilliant CEO of Jabot Cosmetics into pliable, unresisting clay. Every time Jack closed his heavy eyelids, Patty's voice slithered into his consciousness, a silken thread of poison weaving through his memories. Asterisk Diane is a viper Jack times Patty would whisper her breath hot against his ear in the suffocating dark. Asterisk Diane only wants your money, your power, your legacy. She is the architect of your misery. She abandoned you. She betrayed you. I am your sanctuary. I am your true love. I have always been the only one who truly understood you, asterisk. Over and over, the insidious mantra was repeated, paired with flashing, distorted images of Diane's past transgressions, magnified by the potent drugs coursing through his veins. Slowly, methodically, Patty scrubbed Jack's mind, clean of the love, forgiveness, and history he shared with his wife. She rewired his neural pathways until the very thought of Diane Jenkins Abbott elicited a visceral reaction of pure, unadulterated hatred. Conversely, Patty positioned herself as his sole anchor in a terrifying world. She was the soothing hand on his fevered brow, the sweet scent of lilacs in a room that smelled of decay and despair. She had rewritten his history, erasing the decades of her own severe mental instability, her violent crimes, and her dangerous obsessions, replacing them with a fabricated, twisted reality where she was the misunderstood victim and Diane was the ultimate monster. By the time the heavy basement door finally opened to the outside world, the Jack Abbott that Genoa City knew and loved was gone. In his place stood a perfectly programmed automaton, a weapon primed, loaded, and pointed directly at the heart of the Abbott family. Meanwhile, miles away, the atmosphere inside the sprawling Abbott mansion was suffocating. The opulent living room, usually a testament to the family's enduring legacy, warmth, and resilience, felt like a grand, silent mausoleum. Outside the sky was a bruised, stormy purple mirroring the heavy dread that had settled over the estate. Diane Jenkins Abbott paced the length of the priceless Persian rug, her elegant features drawn and pale, her eyes rimmed with angry red from countless sleepless nights. She clutched a crumpled silk handkerchief, twisting it into tight knots, her gaze darting to the silent grandfather clock every few seconds. "He's been gone too long, Kyle." Diane's voice trembled, breaking the heavy, oppressive silence. "The police have nothing. The private investigators have hit a brick wall. I feel like I'm losing my mind. What if he's out there somewhere hurt? Or worse?" Kyle Abbott sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, his posture rigid, the immense stress of running a global cosmetics empire alone and searching for his missing father, etching deep, premature lines into his young face. "We cannot give up hope, Mom. Dad is a survivor. He's Jack Abbott. He has fought his way back from the brink more times than I can count. Whoever took him doesn't know who they're dealing with." Billy Abbott stood by the crystal decanters on the mahogany side table, pouring himself a measure of scotch he desperately needed but hadn't yet brought to his lips. He stared at the amber liquid, his jaw clenched tight. "Kyle is right. Diane Billy offered, though." His voice lacked its usual arrogant confidence. "Jack has navigated worse storms than this. We have the best security teams on the continent scouring every inch of the Midwest. We will find him. We just have to hold the line." Before Diane could offer a tearful reply, the heavy brass handle of the grand oak front door clicked. The sound was sharp, cutting through the tension in the room like a blade. All three heads snapped toward the entryway. The door slowly groaned open, revealing the silhouette of a tall man standing against the backdrop of the stormy evening. Jack Diane breathed the handkerchief dropping from her trembling hands. He stepped into the warm light of the foyer. It was him. He looked thinner, his tailored suit hanging slightly loose on his frame, his silver hair slightly unkempt, but he was alive. Standing just a step behind him, partially obscured by his broad shoulders, was a woman. "Dad!" Kyle shouted, leaping up from the sofa, a wave of profound relief crashing over him. "Oh my God, Jack, you're alive!" Diane cried out, a sob of pure, unadulterated joy ripping from her throat. She didn't hesitate. She ran across the living room, her arms outstretched, desperate to feel the warmth of her husband, to bury her face in his chest and know that the nightmare was finally over. But as she closed the distance, preparing to throw her arms around his neck, Jack's reaction froze the blood in her veins. He didn't open his arms. He didn't smile. Instead, Jack recoiled violently, taking a sharp step back as if Diane were covered in a deadly contagion. He threw his hands up, shoving her away, with a forceful thrust to her shoulders that sent her stumbling backward. "Don't touch me, Jack," snarled his voice, a low, guttural growl that sounded entirely foreign to his family. Diane gasped, catching her balance, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. "Jack, honey, it's me. It's Diane. You're home. You're safe now." I know exactly who you are, Jack spat his eyes, usually so warm and full of life now, dead glassy and burning with an unnatural, chilling fire. He looked at her with a level of disgust and revulsion that made Diane physically nauseous. You are a parasite, a manipulative gold-digging disease that infected my life and my family, and I am finally cured of you. The silence that followed was deafening. Kyle stopped dead in his tracks, his smile vanishing, replaced by sheer bewilderment. Billy slowly set his glass of scotch down on the mahogany table, his instincts instantly flaring on high alert. Dad, what the hell are you talking about? Kyle demanded, stepping cautiously toward his father. It's Mom. We've been out of our minds with worry. Where have you been? What happened to you? Jack ignored his son entirely, his hateful glare locked onto Diane. What happened to me, Kyle, is that I finally woke up. I spent weeks in isolation, and in that quiet, the truth became blindingly clear. I saw the decades of lies. I saw how this woman, he pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at Diane, has used me, manipulated me, and destroyed everything pure in my life. But I was saved. Jack reached behind him and gently, almost reverently, pulled the woman from the shadows into the light of the chandelier. Diane's breath hitched in her throat. Kyle let out a sharp gasp. Billy's eyes widened in absolute horror. It was Patty Williams. She looked radiant, dressed in a soft floral dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She clung to Jack's arm, looking up at him with wide, adoring eyes, playing the role of the innocent savior to absolute perfection. Patty Billy breathed out the name, tasting like ash in his mouth. Jack, have you lost your mind? She's a psychopath. She's tried to kill people in this very house. Shut your mouth, Billy Jack roared, stepping protectively in front of Patty. Do not speak of her that way. Patty is the only pure, honest thing in my life. She is the woman who saved me from the darkness. She opened my eyes to the monster I was married to. She is my soulmate. I love her deeply and completely in a way I have never loved anyone else. Diane felt the room spinning. The joy that had filled her heart just moments ago had evaporated, replaced by a crushing, suffocating agony. This couldn't be real. It had to be a nightmare. Jack, please, she wept, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. She's sick. She's done something to you. You don't mean this. You love me. We are husband and wife. Not for long, Jack said, his voice dropping to an icy, emotionless register that sent shivers down Diane's spine. I am contacting my lawyers first thing in the morning. I want a divorce, Diane, immediately. I want you out of my house, out of Jabot, and out of my life forever. Because as soon as the ink is dry on those papers, I am marrying Patty. The declaration dropped like a bomb in the middle of the Abbott living room. No, Diane whispered, shaking her head frantically. No, I won't accept this. You are not in your right mind, Jack. I am not leaving you. I am your wife. Driven by a desperate, frantic need to reach the man buried beneath this horrific delusion, Diane took a step forward. She ignored the warning signs, ignored the rigid tension in his jaw and the feral look in his eyes. Jack, look at me. Really, look at me, she pleaded, reaching out her trembling hand to gently touch his arm, hoping a physical connection might snap him out of whatever trance Patty had put him in. The moment her fingers brushed the fabric of his sleeve, Jack snapped. It was a blur of inexplicable, explosive violence. Jack's arm swung backward and then launched forward in a wide, vicious arc. The sharp, sickening crack of flesh meeting flesh echoed through the cavernous living room like a gunshot. The sheer force of the slap lifted Diane off her feet. Her head snapped violently to the side and she was sent crashing backward. She collided heavily with the sharp edge of the mahogany coffee table, a cry of pain escaping her lips, before she crumpled to the floor, her hair falling over her face, a bright red mark already blooming across her cheek. For a fraction of a second, time stood still. The grandfather clock ticked. The storm outside raged. And the Abbott family shattered. Jack Abbott, a man who prided himself on his chivalry, his honor, and his fierce protection of women, stood over his fallen wife, his chest heaving, his fist clenched, completely devoid of remorse. Then the room erupted. Mom Kyle screamed, a primal sound of terror and rage. He lunged forward, not toward his mother, but toward the man who had just struck her. "You son of a bitch," Kyle roared, grabbing Jack by the lapels of his suit and shoving him hard against the foyer wall. "Don't you ever lay a hand on her. What is wrong with you?" "Get off me, you ungrateful brat," Jack bellowed, his face twisting in fury. To Kyle's shock, his father fought back with an unnatural, adrenaline-fueled strength. Jack broke Kyle's grip, throwing a wild punch that narrowly missed his son's jaw. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," Billy yelled, sprinting across the room and throwing his entire body weight between his brother and his nephew. "Stand down, both of you, back the hell off." Billy shoved Kyle backward to create space, then turned to face Jack, keeping his hands up in a placating but defensive gesture. "Jack, look at yourself," Billy shouted, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. "You just hit your wife. You just swung at your son. This isn't you. Patty has brainwashed you. She's pumped you full of drugs and scrambled your brains, man. You need a hospital." "I need you all out of my sight," Jack screamed, his eyes darting frantically around the room, wild and untamed. He reached out and grabbed Patty's hand, pulling her tight against his side. "They're trying to separate us, Patty. Just like you said they would. They're trying to keep me in the dark." "I know, my love," Patty cooed softly, her voice a sickly sweet juxtaposition to the violence that had just occurred. She stroked Jack's arm soothingly. "They don't understand our love. They are toxic, Jack. But I am here. I will protect you." Hovering near the grand entryway, partially obscured by the shadows of the sweeping staircase, Patty Williams watched the destruction unfold. A slow, chilling smile spread across her ruby-red lips. It was a smile of absolute, terrifying satisfaction. Her heart fluttered with a sick, triumphant joy. The chaotic symphony of Kyle's furious shouting, Billy's desperate attempts to maintain order, and Diane's muffled, broken sobs was music to her ears. Her plan had not just worked. It had exceeded her wildest expectations. She had taken the great Jack Abbott, broken his mind into 1,000 jagged pieces, and glued them back together in her own image. He was no longer a man. He was her ultimate weapon, her loyal soldier, her devoted puppet. She had finally won. After years of being cast aside, of being called crazy, of watching from the sidelines as other women claimed the man she believed was rightfully hers, Patty had claimed her prize. And she had destroyed Diane Jenkins in the process. On the floor, amidst the shattered remnants of her life, Diane slowly pushed herself up onto her elbows. Her cheek burned with a fiery, agonizing pain, but it was nothing compared to the gaping wound in her chest. She tasted the metallic tang of blood on her lip. Through a blur of hot, stinging tears, Diane looked up at the man standing near the door, the man she had fought so hard to build a life with. The man she had married, the father of her child, the love of her life. He was looking back at her, but there was no recognition in his eyes. There was no love, no warmth, no regret. There was only the cold, hard stare of a stranger who viewed her as an enemy to be eradicated. Diane let out a ragged, agonizing sob, clutching her chest as if trying to physically hold her breaking heart together. She was in deep, insurmountable agony. She couldn't understand it. She couldn't comprehend how the loving, devoted husband who had kissed her goodbye weeks ago had been transformed into this violent, hateful monster. The reality was too horrific to process. Jack was back, but the man she loved was dead, replaced by a phantom, controlled by the smiling, psychotic woman standing by his side. And as Diane wept on the floor of the Abbott mansion, she realized with terrifying clarity that the battle for Jack Abbott's soul had already been lost.